Hey everyone, before this video starts, I'd like to give a special thank you to all my Patreon and Twitch subscribers. If you'd like to learn how to support this channel, possibly for free, just hang out till the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Keemstar DM'd me, and he's like, he's saying something about Deaf Noodles. He's like, you gotta look at this guy, he's getting crazy. I'm not scared, but he's afraid he's gonna do something to himself. Okay, let's see what this is. Dear Deaf Noodles, you gotta stop this session with me. I'm not gonna join in with everyone else making fun of you. Believe it or not, I'm actually concerned. This is not healthy behavior. It's roasting you. I'm not roasting you with this tweet. Please just stop for your mental health.
I don't know. That man is like petty. He's petty, and I mean, a lot of people who will like psychoanalyze him and say that he's like a sociopath or all this shit. Yeah. My therapist thinks he's like a sociopath. I don't know. But yeah, I do. I
Look
talk
at
about
Tiny
therapy.
just
Hey, thank you so much for the sub, bro.
Right, with my therapist. Yes. Folks,
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
I don't.
It's interesting. I think the most interesting thing about this video here is there's like bizarrely a lot going on here. Because Keemstar sent this to me, and I'm still trying to understand Keemstar because he's a very bizarre person. So, like, Keemstar DMs me every once in a while. He DM'd me after the whole Deaf Noodles thing. He's like, I told you he was a terrible guy. And I said, listen, like, honestly, I'm not getting involved in you and his drama. And I'm having a one-on-one issue with him. And I'm not going to formulate my opinions on Deaf Noodles based off of the opinions of people that don't like him. You know what I mean? I try to do my best to gauge people myself. But then he sent me a bunch of stuff, and I looked at it. That was a while back, and I was like, okay, but still, I'm not gonna jump on like a hate bandwagon. And then Keemstar posted this clip, and he basically told me that Deaf Noodles, he feels bad for Deaf Noodles, and that he's going crazy, and he's not scared of Deaf Noodles, but he's afraid that he's gonna hurt himself. And then I listened to this, and I'll listen to it again, but it doesn't really, nothing says to me that he's going to hurt himself. But there is some interesting stuff in this. It's actually a lot. It's actually a very interesting clip. But the thing that I'm more concerned with right now is, like, is this actually genuine Keemstar, or is this his appeal to my empathy? Because I think he knows me well enough to know that I'm not just like, that I'm not just gonna like dogpile, and maybe this is his appeal to like my emotion. What I will say though is I'm gonna watch this one more time.
I don't know. That man is like petty. He's petty, and I mean, a lot of people who will like psychoanalyze him and say that he's like a sociopath or all this shit. Yeah.
I think that Keemstar is a sociopath. How would you define that? I don't even know how to spell sociopath, to be absolutely honest with you. A person with a personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behaviors and lack of conscience. I don't think that that's Keemstar. I don't think Keemstar is a sociopath. Keemstar does have a lot of he actually isn't antisocial at all. Keemstar is the opposite. He has a lot of friends. Now, in my opinion, a lot of them tend to be younger, edgier content creators, which I do find a little weird. But he's not antisocial in any capacity. I also don't think that he has a lack of conscience. Keemstar has a bizarre conscience. Observing Keemstar, he has a really interesting moral code where I've noticed in some stories he will sensationalize stories just for the sake of the sensationalizing of it. But then he also takes it really seriously when people flat out like report inaccurate information on content, which was his big issue with Deaf Noodles. He's also like a super like troll, which is bizarre behavior for a 40-year-old. And admittedly, I was on TikTok making a lot of edgy jokes when I was 30, so I guess I can't criticize too much, though it does go rather far. But yeah, that's kind of how this whole thing started. Deaf Noodles and Keemstar's issues were basically Deaf Noodles apparently was reporting wildly inaccurate information on some of his content. A lot of big content creators called him out. Even some smaller news articles, I guess, called him out for just making up information, and then he blamed it on a character that he had, and everything was a joke, and then he dropped the shtick, and we saw some similar patterns of that in my conversation with him justifying his behavior with jokes and stuff. So yeah, it seems like the interesting thing here, and then and then that led into Keemstar making a very inappropriate joke, which I've already expressed to Keemstar. Is that he's like, oh, he basically said that there are grooming allegations against Def Noodles, and it's a joke. That's what Keemstar says, and it is a joke. But for some reason, we think that jokes mean that like everything's meaningless and there's no meaning behind jokes. The joke was supposed to be to like, see, this is how dangerous and inaccurate information can be. Problem I have with that is that like I'm a man, and as a man, I interpret somebody labeling somebody like a pedophile in some capacity. That's an act of violence, because we know that men will harm other people, but other men who hurt children, right? And so like that's just a wildly inappropriate joke to make, and I think that it shows a massive immaturity from Keemstar to make that type of joke in the first place. You could have made up a story about anything else, but you chose to do some kind of like a grooming allegation. It doesn't seem, though, that anybody takes that allegation seriously. But what I am curious about, because I mean, we just went on a tear on Keemstar, is this is a very interesting scenario to me, because I genuinely understand why people don't like Keemstar. It's completely understandable and justifiable, but there does seem to be a little bit of like an obsession from Def Noodles when it comes to Keemstar that I simply don't understand. A lot of his videos centralize around Keemstar or Ethan, and Ethan is the, other side of the coin for Keemstar. That's basically the internet is Ethan Klein versus Keemstar, and Def Noodles seems to be obsessed with both of them, and maybe obsessed is too loaded of a word, but he seems to be very focused on those two very large figures. And I wonder if some of the hatred towards Keemstar comes from a desire to be liked by Ethan. Does that make sense? And again, I'm not saying that there aren't criticisms, because I would love to sit down with Keemstar. I have a particular issue with the way that Keemstar has spoken about sexual assault in the past that has actually personally been very frustrating. And one of the reasons why I haven't been, hey, go fuck yourself, Keemstar, is because I actually want to have a conversation with him at one point about it in a more educational way, because I find it very problematic, and it's something that's very much frustrated me. But anyway, yeah, I wonder if that's part of it. What's interesting to me, though, is that he says that he talks to his therapist about Keemstar, and that their their therapist, or a Def's therapist, seems to have an analysis that he's a sociopath. The one thing that's an interesting indicator to me is that the fact that Def Noodles has such a big issue with Keemstar that he talks to his therapist about it, because to me that suggests it's a very large prevailing stressor in his life, and I truly do wonder why it's such a large prevailing stress in his life. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. I'm very curious. But also this bit here about him being a sociopath.
My therapist thinks he's like a sociopath. I don't know. But yeah, I do. I talk about Keemstar with my therapist. Yes. So,
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know.
The reason that's interesting to me is because I don't think that it's reasonable to say Keemstar is a sociopath. And I also, nobody knows who Keemstar is. Nobody knows who Trisha Paytas is. Nobody knows who Def Noodles is. Nobody even really knows who H3 is. These are really big names, especially H3 and Keemstar. But these are really big names on the internet. But these people don't really spill into the real world. And so I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that the therapist doesn't know who Keemstar is. But the therapist is getting an analysis on who Keemstar is from Def Noodles. So the way that Def describes Keemstar seems to be like a sociopath. But like we said, I have the definition here. Sociopath, a person with personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behaviors and lack of conscience. I don't think that Keemstar has a lack of conscience. I think that he has a bizarre moral code. He's definitely not antisocial. You could say he's immature, but he's not a sociopath. And so It's interesting. It's interesting how much Keemstar has consumed Def Noodle's life. Again, I don't know why Keemstar reached out to me to say this. He mentioned that he wants me. He's like, "Oh, you got to talk to Def. He's obsessed with me or something." I wonder if I'm a little bit weary. I still haven't figured out all of Keemstar's motivations. I still haven't figured everything out. I don't have a complete character profile on Keemstar yet. He's an interesting guy. You know, he's not super complex, but I wonder if he reached out to me because he genuinely feels bad for Def Noodles, which I wouldn't necessarily doubt, or if he reached out to me to try to like stir the pot and have other people and have other people try to like go after Def Noodles in some capacity and deplatform him in some way. You know, like I wouldn't doubt that's like, oh, Keemstar is saying this to me to encourage me to make a video that Def Noodles will watch, and then you know, then some kind of an issue arises from it, and et cetera, et cetera. But I will say that I do think that it is a bit of an unhealthy obsession here. So when I said I wouldn't associate with Keemstar, like I said before, this is one of the things that's very important to me. It's always been very important to me, is like getting my point across is very valuable. And Keemstar is a large content creator with a lot of followers, and he said some stuff that that I don't like about like sexual assault. And so to me, my perspective is like, if I can sit down and have a conversation with him and I can get him to change his mind on some things, like truly, then that means that everybody that consumes his content, we will potentially be like, oh, look, he was wrong in this capacity. I need to reflect on how I was wrong. One of the things that people tend to do, there's different communities of different people. So the thing that I've always tried to do when it comes to expressing my point is to focus less on expressing my point to people that already agree with me, and focus more on expressing my point to people who disagree with me. So if I sat here and I said a bunch of stuff about sexual assault, you guys are going to agree with me because you're more educated on these topics. But there are people who still don't understand. And if I just continue to sit in this sphere and be like, I'm not going to associate with Keemstar because he's done bad things, then like, what's the outcome of that? The people who align with Keemstar and identify with him in some capacity, they're just not gonna be what I would consider educated on these topics that are very important. So, you know, detaching yourself from content creators because they've done bad things, especially when I think the one thing I do think about Keemstar is I think he actually is somebody who could be swayed. I think this sounds like really weird, but I think that he could actually have an actual reasonable conversation. But to stay away from it just on the foundation that like, oh, I shouldn't like this guy because it looks like, because of the way people are going to perceive is like, well, Papa Gut's talking to Keemstar. It doesn't matter what's about, but then it feels like I've taken a side, right? We already know. We haven't done Paint in a while. We already know here that we have the Keemstar. Is this too big? We have the Keemstar side, right? Get the Keemstar side. And then we have the H3 side on the internet. And these are like polar opposites here. These are two very opposite communities. And they represent two very different things. And what ends up happening is like if you talk to one of these people, then you like, or if you align yourself with one of these people in any capacity, then this is it. This is who you are. You're either a Keemstar or an H3er. I don't know. But I think that that's the worst thing to do, is to try to gravitate towards these fields, because there's criticisms to make about both of these content creators. And there's criticism to make about both these content creators. And so I'm not going to align myself with either of them. And to be honest with you, a lot of the stuff that happens on the internet is stuff that happens on the internet. And I look at this as a job in the sense where like these are to a degree coworkers.
Just Definer just resubscribed.
Thank you so much for the sub, brother.
Months. Can I get a burger, boss?
What? These are coworkers in a sense. Now, obviously, they're larger creators than me, but they're coworkers in a sense. And like, I don't like, who likes their coworkers? You know what I mean? Most people are like, yeah, I like my coworker. I just wouldn't hang out with them outside of work. Like, yeah, that's how I feel. You know what I mean? but it doesn't mean they're shitty people because they've said really dumb things. I've known people like a lot like Keemstar who aren't like super involved in social stuff, and they say some stuff that is disagreeable. But they tend to mean well. H3 is somebody who's like really ingrained in social topics, but I think that some of the ways that he interacts can be negative. So I'm not a big fan of that. You know, there's criticisms to make on both sides, but I'm not going to camp myself with either one. What I'm going to do here is right here. This is Fat Gump. I'm going to sit here in this sphere. Now, this sphere is very small right now. I mean, it's big because I'm fat, but it's small right now. But this is going to grow, and you're going to see that there's going to be, it's no longer going to be, it's going to be 3 dads instead of 2 on the internet. So we're just creating that third camp, guys. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and another special shout out to all my Patreon and Twitch subs. If you'd like to support this channel further than you already have by just watching the video alone, go down to the links below where you can sub on my Patreon, which will allow you to get your name on this beautiful black wall. Or you can go to the Twitch page and you can actually use a free Amazon Prime sub, if you have Amazon Prime, to subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.